slides for you today. Mark, I'll give you the high sign and you can move me along. Let me ask in beginning, have any of you been to the island of Sardinia? That's about what I thought. The island of Sardinia is the second largest island in the Mediterranean, just right south of Corsica. It looks like one of the lands that was booted into its resting place by the mighty Buddha Rome, and it kind of was. The Roman Empire occupied this land for over 700 years, dating all the way back to the 3rd century. Before Rome, there was Carthage. And before that, an uneasy alliance between the native Sardinians and the Phoenicians, which is to say that if we're talking about the Phoenicians, you know we're talking a long time ago. By the time we got to the Middle Ages, the islands changed hands. It was now under the thumb of the Vandals, and then the Byzantines. And attempts to subdue the island and its people proved very difficult. The neuralgic people, the native name of these folks, the native Sardinians, a proud and fiercely independent people, they've always been, always resisting the thumb of their colonizers. Their island home was treated like the breadbasket of Rome, and then eventually every other squad who tried to rule them. It eventually led to the Spanish king Aragon, which I admit sounds a little bit more Lord of the Rings, but it's true. Aragon dubbed this beautiful island now the Kingdom of Sardinia, and its people his subjects. 700 years under Rome, 600 years under Spain, and since 1718, the island belonged once again to Italy. It became the Italian Republic. All in all, the people of Sardinia have known 13 external rulers over the course of 3,000 years of history. Scholars believe that most of the Old Testament was written down during what we called the Babylonian exile. People of faith are living strangers in a strange land. The Old Testament written down to record now the oral history of God and God's people. It was during a time when the people of Israel and who they were and what they were and how they were, you could not take it for granted. I've talked about this period in the faith of our collective walk with our confirmation class. I likened it, albeit poorly, to leaving home. Heading off to college, heading off to the military, leaving the place like this church where everyone knows you, knows what you're like, have watched you grow. You leave where you are, how you are, who you are, everything that you hold to be sacred, every lesson you've learned. And now, nothing will be assumed because now of geography. Everything anyone will know about you will have to be modeled into actions. I've talked a bit before about my first college roommate. He asked his professor to call him Nate Dog. That was fun. He walked onto campus, Nate Dog did, like his name, a bit like a dog who has slipped its leash. It ran onto campus full speed, Nate Dog did. He was untethered, he was unprotected. After the first semester report cards, Mom and Dad drove over from Idaho with moving boxes. It turns out that whoever he was back in Idaho did not come to live and thrive in Spokane, Washington. And it was during the time of the exile that many of the traditions that we think of, many of the stories that you and I know, the ones we've taught our kids, the practices that we know of the Jewish faith, it was there that they began precisely because preserving who you are and what you believe about yourself and your God, what you believe about your place in the world. It takes on a certain urgency when now, like Israel, as a stranger in a strange land, and then all those years ago after, when Sardinia began being seen as strangers in their own land. It was a kind of resistance writing down the scriptures. Resistance became its own kind of religious devotion. There in Sardinia, where our story takes place, the land that we focus on was called Barbaria. You don't have to be a Latin scholar to hear the word barbarians. The Rome gave this region of Sardinia this name, calling it the land of barbarians. The people wore it with pride. The 17th century, while under control of the Spanish crown, we hear a story of a local bandit He's arrested for a capital crime, but somehow he flees. He flees to Barbaria. He arrives at this very small, remote village of Lula. He's innocent. And he prays to St. Francis. He credits St. Francis, calling it the miracle of his vindication. In a tiny little village in Lula, he built a sanctuary. It bears the saint's name, San Francisco. Legend has it that every year the vindicated bandit would trek to the sanctuary out of Thanksgiving, 20 or so miles, the journey he undertakes overnight. Over the time, as it often does, a path like that becomes a pilgrimage trail. It attracts devotion, and the practice continues today. It draws hundreds, if not thousands, of people every year who leave under the cover of darkness and arrive at a sacred place, many out of devotion. Some even walk it barefoot. But many also because of what happens when you arrive. It's a ritual for the pilgrims who make it, now some over 300 years old. When you arrive at San Francisco, they offer you a foot bath to clean your feet, for many, as I've said, walk barefoot. And then comes the main attraction. Why you'll find people there from all over the world. When you arrive, you're also given a bowl of su filindeo. Su filindeo is what you could call the rarest pasta in the world. It's offered to hungry pilgrims. It's served in a soup of mutton broth and lamb. It comes with a massive amount of pepperoni cheese, or pecorino cheese. The pasta is the reason why people from all over the world, foodies and gastronoms and people, maybe even like you and me, will trek out there just to get now this bowl. The name means threads of God, and while there's not an authoritative history of how this particular pasta came about, what we do know is that it was only until recently. It was only at the sanctuary San Francisco, only in the Barbaria region of Sardinia, only here and now twice a year that anyone could partake of the rarest pasta in the world. There's nothing magical about su filindeo. It doesn't make it rare. The ingredients, the preparation, it's common knowledge. They're not trying to hide it. Nothing has changed for 300 years. I've never made pasta at home. Many of you probably have. I've never have. I looked it up online, despite the fact that I have a whole shelf of cookbooks. I clicked the first link. Simple recipe is what it said. It was exactly this, minus an egg. Semolina wheat flour, water, salt, kneaded together as you might do today, and then worked into strands. The instructions I found suggested I use a pasta machine, or I make my peace with cutting thicker strips for easier preparation. But otherwise, there's nothing peculiar about what goes into su filindeo, nothing strange. It's not protected either. Nothing about the threads of God is hidden from view. You can go online when you get home. And for those watching online, when you're done. You can go online, go to YouTube. You can watch as many videos as you like. It's right there to see. You'll see what I mean. See, it isn't what goes into the pasta, but what makes su filindeo the rarest pasta in the world is what happens to the pasta. Once the dough is kneaded to a consistency reaching what they would call perfection, it's stretched and doubled and doubled and doubled again, 8 times in total, holding now each of the 256 strands of fine, intricate pasta in hand. Each is layered in a crisscrossing form across a circular wooden frame. 3 noodles over and over, 3 noodles layered over and over and over again until it's finished. And when one form is done, su filindeo is taken out to the sun to dry, and the process begins once again. You can read about it. Type su filindeo into Google. You'll be taken to many an article, including one from what's called the Gastro Obscura. It's part of the Atlas Obscura, which has submissions about Milwaukee, too. They describe the preparation as unfathomably intricate. They call it nearly impossible to make. Engineers from Barilla, which is the largest pasta manufacturer in the world, you can find them at your local store today. Engineers from Barilla were sent to Sardinia, to Paolo's house, to learn how to do this, so they might make a machine, so that they may mass produce it. They failed, just like celebrity chefs. One of them named Jamie Oliver, who's been on TV for eons, he tapped out after 2 hours. It's only available twice a year, and only in this remote region. It's in a hard-to-get-to part of the Mediterranean, and all of that, sure, can make this pasta as rare as it could be, but what gives this sacred food its title is not where you have to go to get it, but it's that up until just very, very recently, the entire process was entrusted to one family. One family has been entrusted to make the threads of God that every pilgrim, every foodie who makes the trek consumes. They spend inordinate times making this. One family passed down from mothers to daughters, generation to generation for over 300 years. And today, there are only 3 people in the entire island who can make su filindeu. They are the custodians of this sacred process, able to make the threads of God. The materials are common. Right here, right now, you could probably find many of them even in this building. The available instruction is online. You can watch it if you want. And preparation, that's where you find the sacred story. One of the custodians of this process, one of these only 3 Sardinians capable of making the threads of God, is this woman, Paola. You could see her here. She learned from her mom, and her mom learned from Paola's grandmother, and there are no preternatural giftedness required. There's no spirituality of semolina or water or salt that they share among the women as if like a coven, as if like their sacred specialness. There is only practice. What makes Paola able to make su filindeu, the rarest, again, pasta in the world, is that Paola practiced. There with her mother, she didn't give up, she didn't quit. She came, as it says, to understand the dough with her hands. This is what it looks like when dried. What makes su filindeu possible is what makes it rare, friends. It's rare because it requires dedication, because it requires willingness, and most of all, it requires instruction. Because look at it, there's nothing intuitive about this pasta when you look at it. In fact, Cindy, in the office, foodie if there ever was one, looked at the picture that's on the bulletin and goes, "Wait, is that pasta? It doesn't look like pasta." It's rare because it requires willingness. It requires instruction. There's nothing intuitive about it, nothing to understand about it, nothing until you are shown how, and nothing even the finest chefs who've got the best training in the whole world have been able to master by themselves. Fearing extinction of this delicacy, Paola and the 2 others began offering instructions for the sake of preparation so that this would not die with them. People came to Sardinia. All have failed, except 2 chefs, one in LA and one in Singapore. And those 2 dedicated themselves almost full time to receive Paola's instruction. Everyone else who came for a class then went back home with promises to practice. They all failed. They all gave up. Not because they couldn't do it, but because they were alone when they tried. They didn't have guiding hands. They didn't have anyone to show them. Our faith, friends, is a kind of su filindeu. It's woven together. It requires practice, requires instruction, a willingness that you have to have in order to persist. Our faith is a tradition that's been passed down, a process of learning, of taking ingredients like we have here in church, but we have here in the world, things like love and grace and community, and to knead them together, and then to be shown how to layer them together by those who themselves have been shown. Our readings today are like those threads themselves, examples of what it means to practice this faith of ours, examples of what it takes to layer them over this frame of our lives and then pass them down. Like you heard from Deuteronomy, our job now is to tell those stories. But more so than that, our job is to show how these stories live in us and in the world. We show what it takes to understand this proverbial dough that is the world we live in, the faith we have, and how to turn this dough into threads of God. This is as close as perhaps this church gets to evangelism. I don't know a single one of us who would sign up for the committee to go bang on doors, door to door. Maybe you do. You would. What our evangelism is, friends, is we model our faith. We try to model it to the world by how we live and move and have our being, to our neighbors, to our family, to our children. We show each other how to do this unfathomably intricate work of constantly interpreting our faith in the changing world, and how we pass down what seems like a nearly impossible task of preparing each other for a future that you and I cannot predict. Evangelism is so much more about talking about the faith. Evangelism, our faith, our living out, is showing each other Christ alive, showing each other right here and right now how we live, how we layer, how we take these sacred threads that come out of the common existence of being together, how it turns into something because our hands understand what we're doing, and we've taken the years, and we will show you. And then you will show others.